we're just waiting for a couple of more people to join. Just mic testing. Anushree, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hear you well as all right.
Perfect.
So, welcome to Coffee with MBA and Beyond, coffee, wine, beer, whichever time zone we are in right now, whatever works best for you. I have my water. All right. I'm Paridhi, co founder of MBA and Beyond. Today, we're going to be talking about MBA essays, how to write a compelling story. Since some of you I can see are targeting Jan 26 intake, and some of you are targeting round two, where the deadlines, as we can see, are in January. And tonight we've got an amazing speaker with us today, Anushree. And Anushree comes from EASA, IESE, pronounced as EASA. And I'd let Anushree introduce herself a little bit first, and then we can kick off the session. Meanwhile, please feel free to go on cameras. We want to make this session interactive. So it'll be nice to see your faces instead of me and Anushree looking at each other. So if you be kind enough to show your faces as well, it'll be nice to see more faces. And second of all, we are going to go through some questions that we've received at the back end, which we will, of course, start addressing. But you can also drop your questions in the chat. And if you're comfortable, since you are the next global business leaders, unmute yourself and ask your questions after raising your hand, of course. So that's how we'll go about the process of the session. Over to you, Anushree. Would love to get your introduction for the audience.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paridhi, for having me on this call. And I would not try to bore anybody, but a very short introduction. I recently graduated a couple of months ago from IESE Business School in Spain. I come from about 6 years of experience in B2B software as a service across marketing, go-to-market strategy, and work primarily in Indian, South Asian, and European firms. But I'm also heading out after the MBA to Germany very soon. So, I mean, if you want to keep in touch with me, you'll probably see where I'm heading, but probably in a very similar space, but in a much better role, which was definitely influenced by the MBA. And happy to talk about any part of the journey that will be helpful for all of you targeting the January round. The clock's ticking already, so I'm very happy to share. And I would absolutely love and reiterate that if you can come on camera, ask your questions, it would be great to have an understanding that we'd want to make this a little more personal versus just speaking to screens. So yeah.
All right. Thanks, Anushree. By the way, congratulations. So where are you moving to, in Berlin or Munich, Frankfurt? Berlin, is it? Oh, wow. Okay. I live in Amsterdam, but Berlin still remains my favorite city in the whole wide world. Very dynamic. Sure, you're going to have a baller time. So all the best for your new journey, next venture, Anushree. And let's stay in touch when I'm in Berlin next. We should definitely meet. And all of you, everyone here, we can all have a good time together when you make it there next year for your Jan 26, 25 intake, whatever that is. All right. So to kick off the session, I'll start with the first question that we've received. And as the questions keep going, and if you have any questions that are popping up in your head, please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hands, like I said. I'm going to start with Anushree. Maybe if you can advise candidates on what are some impactful ways to begin an MBA essay to engage the reader immediately. So maybe if you can talk about some tips and tricks there, while everybody's story building, storyboarding, all of that. So yeah.
Sure. I think I will definitely, these answers will the kind of the session we have today, I'm just a fair warning. It's not going to be very business-like because the whole idea, let me break this to you if it's a myth, that you need to really prove to the MBA admissions team that you know all about business. It's not what sells. It's not what really gets by, because I think, especially now having worked with the school's admissions team, having seen some students, having seen some essays, more than a few actually, the idea is to really stand out as a story. So I think I simply went by keeping three things in mind. One, which they want to know you. So always start with a personal anecdote and not some quote by who, somebody quoted something, and that's usually how people start. But it's a mistake, I would say. If it works, great. But I do feel a personal anecdote is what sets the tone. It helps you start building a story which already connects with the reader. Because just imagine the person's reading probably 1,000 MBA essays. They just want to skim through, but you want them to hold hold on to it, because if your beginning is good, that's what sets the tone, and the person starts reading and continues reading. So I think that's one. Second, I think it's often ignored, but when you are crafting an essay, it's you're not just providing information, but I think the idea is to also ask a little bit of thought-provoking questions, which shows that you've done your research very well of the school, of the people who have attended the school, of alumni, of current students, of subjects that they are training, of, let's say, departments. Like, let's just say ESA, right? Like, if somebody's getting an ESA right now, I'd want you to know about, the kind of efforts the school is making in terms of building up a sustainability department of sorts, and like the kind of forays that it has made until now in terms of sustainability. So I think that's an important part to have, that you ask thought-provoking questions and feed them with, it shows that you've done your research. And I think the third part being, it's a very key thing to storytelling, nothing to do with the whole MBA thing. You want to make your essays impactful. It's only when you're able to create sort of image with your story. So I think like this is very technical to storytelling, but it is key that when the person's reading it, they cannot be bored. They cannot be bored. So they need to see that you really worked hard, and your journey needs to be painted as good as an image in front of them. So I think creating an imagery, and it's a very key concept with everybody who's like, exposed to marketing in general, whether tech, whether non-tech, it doesn't matter. Everything you read, whether SaaS, non-SaaS, everything, it brims from an image. So I think creating that imagery is super important. But yeah, like just going over the three things I said. One was you start with a personal anecdote, you ask thought-provoking questions, and in turn feed them with the research you've done, a key research, not just that I know you teach this subject, but a key research. And you use vivid imagery. I think that's very key.
Wow, thanks a lot, Anushree. I think like how you encapsulated those 3 points with such good examples. I want like MBA and Beyond to publish this as a blog under your name. Of course, you should. Like, no, this is like really well said, and I completely align with the personal anecdote part of it. I'll be honest. So I'm an avid reader, for everybody here to know. Since we started MBA and Beyond, one of the most interesting bits, my bedtime story, is actually to read somebody's essay. And like essays around Stanford has an amazing question. What matters to you most and why? Sometimes when I read stories and just 2 paragraphs can give me goosebumps, they mostly start with personal anecdotes. INSEAD asks very deep questions which do not have to revolve around your professional life. It has to be your personal life. But while we are talking about this, I want to share a big mistake that a lot of candidates make at MBA and Beyond, even after, when they come on board, when they start working with us. So one of the first exercises that you have to do, I'm sorry about that. I'll just log in. Allow me a second. So we don't make that mistake, and we make sure that what Anushree just talked about, I'll walk you through a candidate's journey who later was able to pull off a very good, I think she got into Columbia. But when she kicked off her journey, so one of the first exercises that you have to do when you come on board with MBA and Beyond, you have to talk about your career trajectory since you graduated from the university, which we all can do beautifully. Like, there's no word limit to it. Oh my God, look at that. That's going on and on and on. But when it comes to talk about your personal aspirations and the prompt that's given, try not to revolve around your professional life, it becomes so difficult for all of us to, think about, talk about, and as if we were just, mechanically built to do a job that was a 9 to 5 or a corporate, which I think is not technically a 9 to 5, it's a 16-hour job, which you guys do, because that's what I know about most of my candidates. So think about this question more than you think about your professional life. Like Anushree said, it's going to position you as a great, protagonist, for you are the protagonist of your story. But that doesn't also mean that you keep over boasting about yourself, that you already know so much about business, with Anushree talked about, or undersell yourself that you absolutely have no idea. That's why you have to go to business school. So finding that sweet balance between what you know and what you don't know is where an MBA will be positioned. But try to kick off with a personal anecdote like we talked. So thanks, Anushree. I will move on to the next question until somebody's asked a question. Okay, no, there's no question in the chats yet. I will move on to the next one. What do you think is the most effective approach to tackle why this school essay?
Sure. I think I covered a little bit of that in this previous question,
Yeah.
but I'll try to structure this much better. I think one is don't give them generic things that they already know about themselves. You go to, I'm going to quote ESA more than usual because, well, I'm from the school and I know the mistakes people make to get in when they don't get in. So I think research very specific content, like I said. Do not tell them, I know you're building, I know you're big on sustainability. I know MBB comes and hires from you. So I want to get in and get into MBB, McKinsey, BCG, or Bain. They know that. They already know that. So I think it's very key that you take up a small detail, which leads me to the second point that you have to speak to people. The only reason, and I go by this, I think I've been asked this 1,000 times in my interviews, why did I choose ESA? In my job interviews, why did I choose ESA? That leads me to the second point. It's because I spoke to like more than 10 people just even before I filled my application form. Those 10 people were a mix of current students, first year, second year, alumni, 1 year, 2 years, people who have deferred their admission, and all sorts of students who absolutely have no connection to each other. So after speaking, when I realized that they're all speaking about the school, but just in their own language, but the same thing, exact same content, and they don't know each other, there has to be something about it. That the value system that the school is probably built out for you. So I think I believe that in my essays that was very clear that I really researched super well. I'd spoken to, of course, I did not go around quoting 10 people, but I quoted probably 2 or 3 people, one with regards to a subject, one with regards to a program, one with regards to a value that they had that they discussed with me. So I think the second part is that personal connection. So one is research specific programs, second is definitely instill personal connection, and third is, I would say, give the school credit for what it does. Like when you want to get into Stanford versus when you want to get into ESA, INSEAD, like what is INSEAD good with? INSEAD is a 1 year program. It is super good for people who want to just come in, switch their career, who are already at mid peak of their career. So give the school credit, and that's what helps you. And it's just a way to tell them that I know you do this well, but this is also why I'm coming to you. So, in INSEAD, you basically tell them that I know that I'm in XYZ. This is what the MBA with INSEAD is going to give me, and this is where I want to go. So, very clear as to what the school can actually offer. And this has to be very well researched. You just can't say that if I told ESA I want to get into Google right after yours and tried selling that story, it wouldn't sell very well to them. So you go back and you search, even if Salesforce, I remember quoting Salesforce because Salesforce was, I think, probably at that point of time, 2 years ago when I had applied, 3 years ago, they were hiring in the last few years. And I spoke to a few people, and that was a very ideal match. And I quoted 2 more companies like that. It was a very ideal match. So I think giving the school credit would be the third point I would focus on, that school needs to know what it does well, and I'm coming there to just get there. And option B comes in other questions and answers, which I'm sure we will cover at some point. Like you just don't go to a school that I want to come here and do this, but also give them option B and C, because there's a very high probability that you wouldn't get what your first choice was. But yeah, I think just to go over the 3 points, once again, research specific programs, definitely focus on personal connection. And third is assign certain value and credit to the school that it deserves for what it has been doing well over the years and what it has created a legacy.
Thanks, Anushree. Just to elaborate on the point that you talked about, the value system, and this is what, I keep whenever I'm doing profile evaluations or, helping candidates, and I'm sure when you were doing that as well. I think we just get so stuck on understanding a school just by the averages of the GMAT and GRE that we look at, and it just gets so stuck in our head that okay, that's how a school is really gauging us. And while it's nothing, it's just a scorecard for you. This schools are looking for a lot more than your scores. They're looking for a personality, which Anushree has put together really well. and the kind of personality that they're looking for, you can really get into the value. Every school has different sets of values. Every school is known for 4 to 6 set of values. You can browse through them. Try to question yourself when you're picking a school for yourself. When you're trying to see whether you're a good match or not, you also have to know whether a school is a good match for your personality or not. So try to see, like, do you have enough examples to support the kind of values the school is looking for? And I think that should be a very essential factor in selecting your school on your own, because when you've selected your school list wisely based on your personality, I believe, and that's what Anushree is also saying, convincing the school is not going to be that hard. Why this school? So do that math, do that research while you look at the averages. Please also spend time looking at the values. And maybe when you go and talk to a profile evaluator or a consultant next, please ask them questions around which kind of schools do you think are a profile personality fit for me. So beyond the scores, just a little bit more context on your profile evaluation there. All right, I will answer. Let's tackle Aditya's question there. Aditya is a deferred applicant. That's amazing. I love candidates who are such early risers, already thinking ahead in the future. And although the approach to essays will be different from a normal entry, I have had the privilege to explore many industries during my undergrad. How do I portray my varied experience in a way that I don't come off as unfocused? Anushree, do you want to maybe take that one up first? Yeah. Or yeah.
Sure. Yeah, just like I think one thing quickly, if you guys must have noticed, it's been two questions, and not even for once have I mentioned the GMAT or GRE. Because I cannot reiterate enough that it's only probably 30% of your application, roughly, for European schools, maybe a tad bit more for US schools, maybe a 50% for US schools, but European schools only care about 30% of it. The rest 70% is all your essays. So there's a lot that goes into it. So to answer your question, you do not come across as unfocused. The idea would be for you to highlight what you learned from those varied experiences and very logically craft the story as to why you went from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. What was your motive? What was your objective? Did you end up achieving it? And then why did you switch from 2 to 3? Because it is absolutely fair when I think it is not very easy to understand unless you are in that MBA class of 70, 100, 200 people, depends on the batch of whichever school you are in. But when I was in my class, I understood that not everybody needed to be an accountant, or if everybody was an accountant and a CFA and whatnot, and every fancy degree possible, which was science and not humanities and not arts, then the discussions in class would be absolutely boring, very, very boring, because that's not what they're looking for. They want those experiences where somebody must have done consulting, left it, tried building something, did not work, tried going back to consulting, didn't work, now is working in a startup in a completely different capacity, maybe marketing. So all of these are exciting stories for them, but it's all about how you are selling it to them. So I think the idea is to show them motive, objective, and what you learned, and draw the relevance to their business school structure, curriculum structure, and how that will help you get to your next step. And that should be relevant for them. Now, if you want to pursue arts in Italy after this, I don't know if that's a goal that you should be quoting to the business school. But so that's what I mean when I say relevance. You could be passionate about arts and you could mention that. You could be passionate about Spain and you could mention that as one of your reasons why you want to go to IESE, but that cannot be your only reason. So I think it's very important that you focus on the learning capsules in those experiences and how it's relevant for school. So nothing to come across as focused at all.
Thanks, Anushree. While the question came across and how you answered, was an anecdote of a candidate who just got an interview invite for Harvard came to my mind, and I wish he was here, and maybe we'll do a session with him soon. His Even though he wasn't a deferred candidate, he had a lot of zigzags in his profile, like a lot of industry switches, function switches and everything, which of course will also help you answer your question, Aditya. He opened his essay with a sentence. I don't know how many of you have seen or watched Game of Thrones. So Lord Baelish goes ahead and says that there's a very famous line by him. chaos isn't a pit, but it's a ladder that only a few can climb. And that's how he opens up his, everything, and then captures the attention and goes on to say that I am one of those few. And then he explains like why, and like Anushree said, if as long as there is a logical reason behind why you made a certain switch, you can totally be exploratory. In fact, for candidates who have had experience, and if it's too much zigzag, we may need to defend that a lot more. But if you're a deferred candidate, business schools absolutely appreciate you exploring various functions, during various internships, just for you to get, to test the waters. So this will definitely not be looked down upon as anything unfocused. I mean, while I understand in our application, we try to prove that, oh, we were born to know that we're going to go for an MBA and our post MBA goal. So everything was like super clear from the beginning. But business schools also understand like you have taken detours here and there a couple of times, and what you learned from that is what matters. All right, let me see if there's. Okay, Sakshi is asking you a personal question, Anushree. She wants to know, when did you think it was the right time for you to pursue an MBA? And now that you look back, how do you feel about it?
One, I think my parents thought it was the right time right after I was done with college. I didn't, because I come from an Indian family. I think my idea for an MBA was always I wanted to be a little more sure of what I wanted to do, what an industry looked like. So I think I was always honestly looking at either an ISP or international programs. And I started thinking about it because a lot would be, many people will be surprised. My first job was Jimmy Choo. I was working with Jimmy Choo as a luxury sales advisor and merchandising and all of it because I had a big interest in. I'd written my thesis on fashion and luxury brand management, and that was the it thing for me at the point. But I think that's exactly the journey I had to go through. From there, I went to tech, and I did it all by myself. That I went to tech, and I started with HR and people ops, and then I crafted my journey to marketing and then strategy, and then I realized that okay, B2B SaaS is the thing. I think this is where I want to base my thing on, and maybe I want to get into more hardcore strategy or more hardcore senior leadership roles in marketing. So that's when once I had spent more than a couple of years understanding what I like and what I don't like, which can only happen when you've worked and networked with enough people. And I've had the wonderful privilege of just being exposed to very senior leaders from a very early on, like from my internship stages. So I think I utilized them very well. So that's when I started thinking that okay, if I want to make it to the other side of the world in a time where let's say in the next 5 years, an MBA is what is going to help me get there, but in the right way possible. Otherwise, it was never about making it abroad, or it was never about. I was already working with a European company. I already had exposure to European offices. I was already traveling to Europe, but I think the idea was always that there was a little. I saw leaders who were doing really well for themselves without an MBA versus with an MBA. And I just personally liked the ones with an MBA. And I realized I wanted to be one of those. So I think it was very clear for me that I wanted to do an MBA, but it was very clear for me too that I wanted to get a few years in. I did not know that would be 5 or 6 years, that I wanted to get a few years in before I stepped into this journey. And I was also very clear I wanted to do a 2 year MBA and not a 1 year MBA because I wanted to give it everything. So I think I was very clear about those 2, 3 things which helped me make my decision faster. And I made this answer a little longer than the last one is because the last one would be when I look back, there was nothing better in my life than those 2 years. So it's probably the best decision I made for myself of getting into the MBA because the MBA teaches you a lot beyond capital markets and strategy and structures in consulting because the kind of network you get exposed to, and I'm sure you guys must have heard this a million times, but it is true. The fact that I can just, go into Peru and call somebody because I need some help versus, I can land up in Dubai and call a friend, or I can have someone refer me, I don't know, in Sweden and just anywhere or in China that I can think of if I ever want to work there is incredible. And 2 years ago, I did not have that. So the power of alumni and the power of network is incredible. And that's your biggest takeaway from the MBA. If you do it, if you justify it in the right way when you're doing it.
Thanks, Anushree. All right, we've got a question from Manav coming in. And I like that question. He's asking, I had a quick question. How to balance humility in applications and more specifically in our essays? Sure, we want to pitch our candidature enthusiastically and convey aspects of our profile, but do you think it would be also helpful to selectively trim some content? Well, I have a term for this and I'd like let Anushree answer for sure. I like to call this humble brag. So you do have to brag, but you have to do it humbly. And that's what your question encapsulates there, Manav. But yeah, over to you, Anushree, like based on your experience, how do you think they can balance bragging and humility? Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting question, and it's something, trust me, humility is something you would need more often than you realize when you enter the MBA, and you will see a very clear distinction. So, one, how you can balance it, I think I really agree with what, like the phrase Paridhi used, that it's a humble brag. You have to talk about the value you bring and not what your titles bring. So if you've been a director already and maybe you've had some fancy, I mean, I was a GTM strategy manager, which is quite fancy for a scale up. It's not at least 3 years ago, I did not see this strategy thing being thrown around by every startup or scale up, but I had it. But I think I barely mentioned something like that. It could have, if it, I mentioned it. I remember I got in, I had a first call, and that's when I mentioned it that, hey, you know what? I also got a promotion to so, and I'm handling so and so. This is my responsibility. So I think the idea is to always show the value in bringing and when you made your transitions. So I think what was interesting always when I look back in my experience, what was always interesting for somebody is when I started telling them my story, that how I started with Jimmy Choo versus how I landed up in B2B SaaS product and go-to-market strategy. It must have been a journey, and we just want to know how did you start with luxury shoes and end up in tech. So that's you must have you must have done something to get to make these transitions. So tell us your story. So I think the idea is always to focus on the value and to focus on how you went from one to two and not about what the two was. So, how I went from it was a big thing at the moment. Like a lot of people were asking me, how did I go from being an HR in a company to, leading marketing for them? I used to work for this unicorn. And it was never about I've never probably used that I led marketing until I was really pushed to talk about my leadership skills. But the idea was how I got to it, the kind of projects I undertook in HR to be able to showcase that my interest was in brand marketing, my interest was in product marketing, and I knew enough about the product while I was pitching to candidates to work on employer branding activities. Because I think these things is what the MBA admissions team catches on very soon. And let me tell you, most I don't know about other schools, but ESA right now and other schools, like a lot of other schools that I already am aware of, your interviews are mostly taken by alumni. So there will be people like me. So you want to be as humble as possible because after having gone through the whole MBA experience, you just want to filter out people who are not humble about how far they have gotten. And that's the key thing. You will see this, and we can talk again once you're done halfway into the MBA. And if you ever want to chat again, that yes, you can drop me a line that you are right, that humility is very key. So be very careful with who you're interviewing because this admissions team is mostly alumni who have gone through this experience. So if you want to give them any sort of fluffed up stuff, they are not going to buy it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, thanks, Anushree. Manav, I hope you found that helpful. I just add one thing here, Manav, and for everyone else, when as we're working on our essays, and I can see some of our candidates, applicants here who just started off. So, schools value your achievements as much as they value your failures, or vice versa. That's how I would say it. If you would notice, like INSEAD used to have two questions, one around your biggest achievement in life and biggest failures. They've replaced they've completely taken away the achievements question. And I think now they just have one question, the latest update about your failure. So they are, Manav, that's answer to your question as well, to what, adding on to what Anushree said. Business schools really want to know what have you learned from your failures that makes you the person that you are today, which can also be technically your achievement in general. So you try to connect the dots together. You will be able to talk about your weaknesses and your failures in light of your achievements. That's how we can, weave it all together to come across as, genuine in our application. So, yeah, that's that. I have a few more questions. Ritika wants to know, if there is a career gap, how should we handle that in our application? That's a good question. I know there are a few candidates here who have a career gap. Of course, it depends how big the gap is. Anushree, do you want to take a jab at it first?
Sure. I think I've covered like bits and pieces of it over time, but again, like I think I cannot stress enough that one, the whole humility comes with a little bit of honesty and reflection. So if you've had a gap, I think it's very important to explain it succinctly that what you did in that gap and how did that contribute to you today wanting to pursue an MBA. Because if you've had a career gap and you're still one of the key applicants to the top MBA programs, something must have happened. And they want to know what must have happened. You couldn't have just sat there, gotten up, and said, I want to go to Howard. So something must have made you do that. So I think that people often underestimate that journey, that what made you think about it, or did you enroll yourself in a course, did you get yourself in a talk, or it could be as minor as you understood that maybe you were helping out with your home business, or maybe it's your mother's business or small business, and you just realized that this needs some structure to solve it. And that's when you realize the only way you can learn more structure and apply it in your family business is an MBA program that focuses. It's very strategic, or it's very consulting driven programs that teach you a lot about solving business cases in the right way. So once again, I think focusing on just one right relevant part to the MBA program you're applying for and tying it back to what you learned during that time you had a gap is very important. Second, I would also say highlight growth, because you couldn't have just sat in that gap. You have to be able to tell them that how you grew in that gap. That maybe just you needed that gap of 6 months, 7 months for your own mental health. Trust me, they're willing to listen to that. But you have to craft a compelling story. You can't just say, I took off because it was a mental health break, because my therapist told me that I should go on a break. And that's not a good enough reason for them. You have to be very real about it. So while you say this, you also have to back it up as to why you wanted to, what parts of your last job maybe you wanted to reflect on that would help you make this decision, and how will those weaknesses be covered maybe, or be like get eliminated through with an MBA, and what can that MBA that achieve help you achieve that additional delta you can say that you lost out on in this journey, that which is what led you to this gap. So I think highlighting growth is very important. And lastly, I would just say that focus on like future aspirations, right? What your aspiration is post it. Gap is not something, it's not a do or a die situation. It's not a deal breaker for anybody. So I think your aspiration, which is once again reinstilling and telling the program again that I'm only giving you something that matters to you, so which is very relevant to you, and that's why I want to come to your school and nobody else's. So that's what you need to keep telling them. So I think those three things: be honest, be reflective, focus on growth, and definitely highlight future aspiration when you want to talk about gaps. It's not a big deal. They do not care so much they do not care as much as you think they care.
Thanks, Anushree. So I can see in the audience, I've talked to 5 candidates sitting here who have gaps, and they will resonate with this. One of them was preparing for UPSC for 2.5 years. The other one was doing it for 3 years. There's one who had a situation, was out of job for 3 years and wasn't able to go back into while they did something. There was somebody who was on a break, just soul searching, doing yoga, learned some pranic healing, all of that. So, all these are reasons you can really talk about in your application. While I understand a year or like a few months is something that you feel comfortable justifying, which US and European schools are comfortable accepting as well, that okay, you took a few months off, you were just traveling around, maybe working on a book which you haven't published yet, or whatever you were doing. But yes, to defend a UPSC or something, there are ways to tackle that. It's a very difficult exam. You have to bring some perspective of what that exam really entails and what it really is. And even though it was a gap, but you were learning, and you were definitely learning a lot during that phase. So you talk about that, you talk about your resilience during that phase, and like how you were persistent in making it through, and it's a very difficult exam. Try to talk about that and how it changed you as a person. As long as how it changed you as a person aligns with the values of the school, like Anushree has said multiple times, it's not going to be hard for you to convince the school. It really reflects your love for the school. What matters, what did you do after that gap? I mean, it was gap, 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 gap. If you have 5 years of gap and then applying to a business school, then it doesn't make sense. But yeah, if you have had a gap 3 years and then 3 years you worked or 4 years you worked, it's completely all right. Okay, we will tackle iPhone 15's question.
Just to add on a little bit to
Yeah.
who's taking UPSC. I mean, anything that you've done, right? Like UPSC was very interesting to me because I got reminded of this recent movie I watched, 12th Fail.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure a lot of you must have watched it. It's a great movie. I just think of it as if you've done that for 2.5 years, you are probably better than a lot of other candidates who are applying or will be at the MBA with you. Because you will find people who have fought wars and have absolutely nothing to do with business to begin with. They don't understand business, but they'll be next to you in the class. And like I said, you can always treat that whole UPSC exam as a sales deal, but at which you only had a shot for 3 times, or you 2 times. You only had a shot 3 times to clear an exam or to clear a deal. So each time you were prepping for it. So it's your preparation, that's the process that matters always, and it's never the result. So 2.5 years, no big deal, considering it's UPSC, or if you're taken off for a healing break, or if it was something else. So I think try always putting it as a relevant something like a business job, then they understand. Treat it as a sales deal, treat it as an account management job, treat it as, I don't know, product building job. But what do entrepreneurs do? They're building something. That doesn't necessarily mean they're making a lot of money because they're not asking you how much your salary was. So I think always bring it down to the relevance that a business people understand easily.
Thanks, Anushree. I'm glad that we addressed so many ways of addressing a gap for everyone here. And do not shy away, because I know some of you have got amazing scores. You've come back stronger. You're doing very well in your growth roles or whatever roles that you're doing in the startup space. Please do not hesitate or shy away from applying to ambitious schools. They do understand and they'll welcome you. So go ambitious as much as you can. Right, let's take iPhone 15's question. Okay, this is Akash. For a college like INSEAD, will it be valuable to bring our life challenges, hardships, along with the ways how you sail through the phase and coming out even stronger? Also, have heard about INSEAD giving preference to candidates with young family or curating sessions for spouse/child. Will that help? I can comment on this, and then Anushree, you can build up. So, not just in INSEAD, if a school is giving you space to talk, let's say if there are optional essays, anything, feel free to talk about it without drawing too much attention to make it look like that you're trying to gain sympathy. While having empathy is one thing, that's what you want adcoms to feel for you, but not trying to over exaggerate on a certain hardship that you've gone through. It should definitely take some space in your application because you want to point out about the whole fact how you've come back stronger. So talk about that, but without elaborating too much on it that it takes up most space in your application. So that's my thought on that. Not just INSEAD, for any business school, that's important. That's why they have failure questions, so on and so forth. And as for what you just talked about, I don't think INSEAD has a bias towards a certain community of candidates. While, of course, like INSEAD, LBS, a lot of US schools as well, they support the partners heavily. So they're like, partner community activities that are happening. For what I know, that INSEAD also offers classes. Like your partner can literally attend all the classes that you would, just that they will not graduate with a degree. You will. So you can really take your partner to all your classes and have them attend whatever they want to learn. So that's what I know. And Anushree, if you want to add anything extra that it'll be nice.
I think nothing particular. You mostly covered it, but I think just to reiterate the last point is, I think don't buy in any of these myths people create. They're mostly not true. They don't prefer any community because you don't actually know the data. The actual data is very different from what people just float around very loosely. So I think keep focusing on what makes you a unique candidate versus anybody else who's probably competing with you. And you need to just forget that part of it. So I think just that, nothing much to add here.
All right, thanks, Anushree. So I don't see any question that I've missed a question. Can I polish my essays using ChatGPT? Of course, you're welcome to. There's technology. But yeah, Anushree, do you want to share some thoughts on that? Your thoughts, I can then, of course, build up. But yeah, we should
Yeah,
use technology, I would say. Yeah.
I'm a very heavy user of AI. Let me tell you
Yeah.
this. It makes life easier, yes. But because I'm also a very heavy user of AI, I don't use ChatGPT a lot. I use Perplexity. It's a much better one. It gives you links. It just gives you more credible sources, I feel, at this point. But can you use it? Yes. How will you use it? Depends on you, how well you know how to use this AI. Because just think that you are not going to be the only one. There's 15,000 other applicants who are applied who will think the same way, and one will know how to use this better. So I think the idea is to always make it as personal as possible. So train the AI that you're using, train your chat GPT the way you need to train. I'm getting that it's going to go a little technical if I get into this, but the real idea is to not post a paragraph and say make it better. And if you use that, I don't think you will get a lot out of it. But the idea is you have to train the AI about your style of writing, about your stories. You have to feed them details, what exactly you want. You can't just write that, hey, make this more personal. That's not going to generate that's not the right question to ask the AI to generate what you're looking for into feed the essays. But I think it's very important to not just blindly trust just because it's good English or it's correct English, that Grammarly can do that for you. Somebody with great English can do that for you. Make it more personal, make it more story-like, make it more driven. Because if every essay starts reading the same, I think by now, even I know which is ChatGPT generated versus which is handwritten and more personally written. So make it so good that they cannot tell you that it's ChatGPT generated. So I think that's very important. Now you'll have to find your experts there. But my idea would always be like work with somebody, work on your own, whatever you decide to do. But then you want to do some finishing touches. That's what ChatGPT can help you with, not to create the story, not to craft the story.
Yeah. I'll just build up on that because I am a big fan of AI myself, like how we're using, but how you use technology is definitely something that you need to figure that out. What Anushri said, the prompts that you give are going to matter. While we can talk about, I can honestly talk about a little challenge that we are facing with ChatGPT in application writing because with our tool that we use, with candidates, that's a lot of introspection. We've been working on an idea where, we have fed in a lot of prompts which are very specific to a few schools like Stanford, INSEAD, and HEC Paris is something we're trying to work with. Some of our candidates have taken that route just to, democratize application consulting because admissions consulting is an expensive game for all of us. We know that. And it's also the hours that you're taking from the consultant. So we wanted to minimize the number of hours, not completely to zero, but whatever, you need to engage with a consultant on should be very specific. We've been trying to use AI for that. However, what we have come to conclusion right now, AI is not at a level where it can replace a human, especially when you're doing things like therapy and when you're doing your application writing. A lot of introspection and brainstorming needs to happen there. AI hasn't reached that stage yet that it gives us that emotional and personal touch to ask us the right questions so that we can answer exactly what a school is looking for. While, of course, to polish your application, you should totally and absolutely use it with the right prompts. That's what I would recommend. But yes, AI should be used widely at different stages of your application for your research, understanding the values of schools, trying to explain your personality to ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT, where do you think my personality fit most? Like when I'm telling you school selection, you can totally use ChatGPT for that. So, yeah. All right. I think there are no more questions. So I'll go back to the question list that we had, Anushree, and maybe we should take this one up. How can applicants without management experience demonstrate the value of their work? Do you want to take that one up? Because yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Super interesting question. Like I said, I cannot say this enough that the MBA is not anymore looking for to fill like 99% of their seats with just a typical background. By that typical, I mean you're either an engineer or you've had some exposure to business in the right way you're supposed to. No, they're not. So I think the first idea is to talk about transferable skills. You could be painting walls with all this. That's okay. Because if people are fighting wars and they are national level swimmers and they had nothing to do with business, are being focused on, it's only because they've got transferable skills. People who hire these people as consultants, like McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Carney, like I can name all the top consultants, they hire these ex veterans who have had no exposure to business solely on their leadership skills, solely because they know how to manage a team which is bigger than, just about 20, which is in the corporate structure, maybe lesser. So I think emphasizing transferable skills, very key. Whatever you have done doesn't matter. How does it translate into the business environment? That's what matters. Like I said, your UPSC translates into great sales deals and into great resilience, which a salesperson should have. Account management, all of that. So I could give more examples like this, but like I said, leadership or an ex-army or even a national level swimmer, it's the level of patience that they have, the tenacity is going to be better than anybody who's worked in just three startups. So I think transferable skills is key. Second, I would say discuss like your narrative. The narrative arc is very important. Discuss your challenges and your learnings. Don't shy away from discussing the challenges you have faced in that non-traditional background. And what do they and how have those experiences kind of shaped your decision making process? Because most of the times they're most of the times in a corporate structure, whether you're in startup consulting, you are just making decisions. And it's the person who is winning or making it sooner than you are is only because they've been able to take that decision faster than you are. So your decision making capability which is only an outcome of the challenges you've faced is very important to come out in that narrative and this is a I would say the narrative art or point is also something which is relevant for the traditional background students. Your narrative is very important as to this part of the essay. What does it comprise of? Like your essays should have a theme by itself, and the school's questions shouldn't be defining that theme. And third, I would say, I think non-traditional backgrounds somehow conventionally, unfortunately, I would say, are given a little more emphasis with regards to passion, right? So that okay, if you are into art and if you are into like non-traditional and you've been painting walls, then you're more passionate, or maybe you're a dancer and you want to come. I know somebody personally from my school was an ex-opera singer right now working in BCG. So if you are into one of these forms of art or something, you're automatically given that label, the biggest label that there could be, a passionate person. So convert that passion into purpose. So that is important. So how does your opera singing, or how does your, I don't know, maybe you teach students how to draw, and how does that convert into purpose? And what do you want to learn in this MBA becomes very important. So I think transferable skills, the narrative arc, and converting passion to purpose, these would be my three focus in terms of how you can highlight unique experiences when you're from a non-traditional background.
Thanks, Anushree. This was amazing. And I just building up, there are examples of yoga trainers going to top business schools, models going to top business schools. Of course, they do not come from like they don't have any managerial skills. But yeah, they just pursued art. And that's also a question that we had earlier. People who are artists are coming from certain, you've already only pursued some kind of art. So, for example, there was this curator of Museum of Modern Arts in New York who made it to Columbia. And I was reading this person's story. Amazing, impressive. Like Anushree said, talk about the transferable skills. While you may not be managing people, but other skills like how you interact with people could position you really well for roles where you have to interact with people, on a day-to-day basis, and you really take care of customer satisfaction. And if you want to pivot to another, let's say an industry, but a similar sort of a function where even though you're not a curator now, but the skill set that you're bringing to the table could be applied there, absolutely, which would be highly valued. So you should totally talk about that. There's a curator who's once hired at Netflix for a certain role after an MBA. So find these non-traditional stories. As long as you have transferable skills, you're pretty sorted. All right, take the last question of the evening. How can candidates, and that's a very interesting question because I don't see that happening to any one of us, but the question is, how can candidates use the optional essay to enhance their application even if they don't have specific issues to explain? So that was a funny question when I got it, because I was wondering, like, oh, do we ever have anyone who ever says, I have nothing to explain in my optional essay? But Anushree, do you want to take that one up?
Yes, I personally used, and I know like many more than, and I'm not lying when I say this, like more than 50 people probably who've made it to the school. Your optional essay is not to highlight some low score or some if you've had a definite red flag, like like you've had a gap for more than like necessity and you want to explain it. But irrespective, one, definitely write your optional essay. Do not even think about the same. And second, reinforce your narrative. As simple as that. It's like a closing remark. It is a closing remark of a lawyer. When you're pitching to an entire jury who is going to make a decision whether the person is guilty or not, it's the closing remark. So sometimes, unfortunate, it's not a myth. People will not read the whole thing. People will read your top first essay, your last one. So you want to ensure that you've excelled in all, but definitely in that first and last one. And this is your last one. So I think reinforcing your narrative, it is a very difficult job to do because it's all your essays put together. It's talking about your challenges, it's talking about your gaps, it's talking about your transferable skills, it's talking about what do you want to achieve, it's talking about which class is more important to you, which professor you want to go for. All of that put together in a few lines, which is super compelling and just sells it to the school. It's end of the day you are pitching yourself. So it your school needs to buy it. That okay, this is somebody I want to go back to. In fact, if somebody has not read the essay, not read the whole essay, that part of reinforcing your narrative can make them often go back and read the rest of your essays, which is definitely coming out. That the outcome of that would definitely be an interview. So reinforcing your narrative, and that would be my only thing. I would not say 3 points here because I think those are very key things anyway, that you cover red flags, you cover. I would never say focus on low scores or anything. If you've had lower than average score, don't try to explain why do you have it, but try to reinforce your narrative. End it on a positive note because that's important. You can't just say something negative about yourself and it's not a pity essay. They don't treat the optional essay as a pity point for them. So they want to know how strong you are as a candidate despite your weaknesses. So this is your time to showcase that. So this answer would be this short.
Thanks, Anushree. Thanks everyone for joining today. I absolutely enjoyed hosting the session with Anushree today with you. And I think we should do this again soon, maybe a specific topic that, like bothers candidates. We try to figure that out. But loved hosting with you. All the best for your journey and hope to see you in Berlin soon. Thanks everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed the session. Thank you everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone. Thank you.